Physical games have existed since the start of gaming. Whether it was cartridges or discs, they were always at the center of how we played games, until now. There have been multiple controversies recently surrounding physical games, with the biggest being Sony announcing that they will stop producing physical discs for new PlayStation games in January of 2028. And even with the massive backlash that Sony has gotten, they do not seem to be backing down. But honestly, this should not be that surprising. Sony, Xbox, and Nintendo have all been planning to move to fully digital for years. Both Xbox and PlayStation already have digital versions of their consoles that are sold for less than their models with disc drives, typically around $50 less. Microsoft is also reportedly testing a feature that would allow you to convert physical Xbox games into digital licenses, which could come particularly useful if future Xbox hardware does not include a disc drive. And now, even game developers themselves are switching over to only digital, the biggest one probably being GTA 6. If you do buy the physical version of GTA 6, you will not be getting a physical game, you will just be getting a code that lets you download it over the internet. And unfortunately, the answer as to why companies are moving to fully digital is pretty simple: money and convenience. From what I could find, the manufacturing cost of a game disc is estimated at around $3.50. For most people, $3 or $4 for every disc probably doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're working on the scale as some of these companies are, that money starts to add up really quickly. So let's look at God of War. In 2022, God of War 2018 had sold over 23 million copies. Sony also reported recently that over 80% of games sold in that quarter were digital. So let's say it's 85% to make it easy. That would leave around 15% of 23 million copies being physical, or about 3.45 million copies. At an estimated $3.50 per disc, that's roughly $12 million just in disc manufacturing. And that's just one game. There are thousands of games that are made and distributed every single year, and manufacturing the disc is only one of the costs. You still have the case, the artwork, the packaging, the shipping, storage, and the retailer's cut, which is typically around 30%. So it's not like companies are moving to digital for no reason. There is obviously incentive to do so, and more importantly, consumers are already just majority of the time choosing to go digital. Just last month, physical game sales in the US just hit an all-time low, with only $85 million in physical spending, which makes it the worst total since the tracking began in 1995. So if digital games are more popular and cheaper, why are physical games needed? Well, for me, it's pretty simple. What can you do after you beat a digital game? Nothing. Some people will play the game over and over again, but for most people, you will probably play it once and uninstall it and never touch it again. With physical games, you could sell it, trade it, or give it to a friend, and you could save yourself money on the used market. Let's say a game costs $70, you could buy it physically, play through it, and then sell it for $40, and you have effectively spent $30 just to play the game. And with games getting more and more expensive, that can easily make up a pretty big difference. Obviously, you don't have to buy digital games for full price, you can get a key or wait for a sale, but still, you can't do anything with it once you're done. There's also just a lot of people who like to collect the games, and I'm going to assume for collectors, putting up a code of a game is a lot less rewarding than actually putting up the disc or the case itself. And I know there are plenty of people out there who do not care about physical games or collecting. I'm one of them. When I played on console, I did not really care about the boxes or the discs. It was honestly just an inconvenience. Sometimes you would misplace a game and God forbid you scratch them. There's also another argument to be made about physical games that I do think is completely valid. Games are not like how they used to be, and games constantly get updated now. And a disc does not necessarily contain the complete game anymore. And the former PlayStation president makes that argument that games require multiple downloads and patches. And for live service games where updates happen very often, it makes having a disc, at least for that specific game, somewhat pointless. But there's one area where physical media still has a massive advantage, and that is game preservation. Over the last few years, there's been a lot more attention on what happens when companies shut down older games. Recently, Stop Killing Games has started a lawsuit against Sony for moving to digital only, and their whole entire movement is dedicated to saving these older games. And while it's not impossible for physical copies of games to be unusable, it's just way easier for digital copies to effectively just be turned off. And a recent example of this that isn't even from the gaming industry, it's actually from PBS. Just recently, PBS lost access to around 50 terabytes of archival footage, covering more than 70 years after its cloud storage provider just went out of business. Now, obviously, physical games aren't perfect for preservation either. A disc can just break, or your console can break, or a game can require an online server. But according to the organization Does It Play, their testing has found that 70% of physical games that they've tested needed no extra downloads at all, with only 10% being unplayable. playable. Somewhere we're starting to kind of see a middle ground of all places is Nintendo. They introduced game key cards on the Switch 2. These are physical cards, but they do not contain the game at all. Instead, the card contains a key that allows the console to download the game. You need an internet connection to download it for the first time, and after that you can play it offline, but the card still has to be inserted. It could maybe scratch the itch of some collectors, so at least they have something to display. I don't know, it could just be a reach for me. But the question of how important physical games are is pretty simple. Both digital and physical games should exist as an option, whether or not one makes more money. I think most people who care for physical games would rather maybe spend an extra $10 instead of having the option just completely taken away from them. But it is likely that fully digital will be the future, and that will definitely suck. Sony has shown no signs of backing down because this has been the plan for years, not just from them, but every major player in the industry. But that is all I have for today. I hope you all enjoyed. Peace.